Yeah.
Eh, but it's flicking.
The Minister of Finance, Mr. Enoch Godongwana, will present the budget allocation for 2026 to Parliament on Wednesday, 25 February at 2 p.m. The budget speech follows the President's State of the Nation address, in which President Cyril Ramaphosa outlined
looks like
government's
Cameron
policy priorities and
Thank you,
program
guys.
of action
Uh-uh.
ahead. The budget sets out how government will fund these priorities within the constraints of available resources, balancing economic growth while supporting the most vulnerable in our society. During the speech, the minister will outline government's key financial, economic, and social commitments, as well as planned expenditure priorities. He will also present a detailed spending plan, including proposals for revenue collection to fund government interventions. The minister will introduce the appropriation bill and table the division of revenue bill, which Parliament will process in the months ahead. The budget process remains one of Parliament's most critical tools for exercising oversight over the executive. Watch the budget speech live across Parliament's platforms from 2 p.m. on Wednesday, 25 February. Your Parliament, your voice, your future.
Dumelang, and a warm welcome to a special live build-up show on Parliament TV. We are live on DSTV channel 408, and you may join our conversation across all platforms using the handle at Parliament of RSA. Libito laka ke Tshepo Mori.
Gamalam Dinguthembi Nkosi Ngoma, and thank you for joining us on this pivotal day for South Africa. In just under 30 minutes at 2 o'clock this afternoon, the Minister of Finance, Mr. Enoch Godongwana, will rise to the National Assembly to deliver the 2026 budget speech. The sitting is held at the Nivemeester Parking Dome in Parliament, right here in Cape Town.
Now, of course, the budget speech is more than just a financial statement. It is the government's annual report card and its blueprint for the year ahead. It sets out in hard numbers exactly how the state plans to fund the priorities outlined by President Cyril Ramaphosa in the State of the Nation address just over 2 weeks ago. Now, as the president noted, the aim is to translate economic indicators into a tangible improvement in the life of every South African.
Absolutely, Tsepo. And the backdrop to this year's speech is particularly fascinating. On one hand, there's a palpable sense of guarded optimism. We have seen 4 consecutive quarters of GDP growth. Inflation has moderated to lows not seen in 20 years. And for the first time in over 16 years, South Africa received a credit rating upgrade. The president himself stated that we are on the cusp of achieving rapid growth.
That is correct, Minkosi. There are positive tailwinds. The end of load shedding, improved efficiency at our ports, and the stability brought by the Government of National Unity are all contributing to renewed investor confidence. Now, Minister Godongwana is also in the enviable position of having some fiscal wind in his sails, with surging gold and platinum group metal prices and a primary budget surplus.
Well, however, as we've seen in our streets interviews in Cape Town, the view from the ground tells a more complex story. For millions of South Africans, this optimism hasn't yet translated into relief at the checkout counter or in their monthly budgets. The average cost of a household food basket is still over 5,300 rands. Uh, and
consumers.
those are some of the packs that come with light TV, and consumers are drowning in the debt with total overdue balances reaching 212 billion. And there's a real concern about bracket creep, where inflation pushes into workers into higher tax brackets without them being any better off.
Of course, that's the key tension of the budget 2026, Tembinkosi. The minister must reassure the markets by capping debt, which is projected to stabilize by just under 78% of GDP, while also addressing the immediate final strain on households and the critical failures in service delivery. From crumbling municipal water infrastructure to failing rail lines, it's a high wire act balancing fiscal consolidation with the urgent need for social and economic relief.
And of course, this balancing act supports, this balancing act happens within a very specific legislative framework. Today, Minister Kodongwana will table 3 crucial pieces of legislation, and Tsepo will briefly outline what those are for our viewers.
Certainly. Now, first, he will table the Division of Revenue Bill, which determines how funds are shared between the national, provincial, and local spheres of government. Secondly, is the fiscal framework, which sets out government's revenue, expenditure, and borrowing plans for the next 3 years. And thirdly, the Appropriations Bill, which provides the legal authority for government to withdraw money from the National Revenue Fund to pay for its programs. These bills will now be subjected to a rigorous months-long process of public comment and parliamentary scrutiny, including detailed budget votes in the weeks ahead.
And that's a process where Parliament plays its crucial oversight role, ensuring the executive is held accountable for every rand spent. And now, to help us unpack all of these layers, the economic data, the political context, and the real world impact, we have an excellent lineup of guests over the next few minutes before 2 o'clock.
That's right, and we'll be joined by leading economists and analysts, including Mr. Alex Mabunda, the CEO of Ntingiso Consulting Group. We'll also speak to commissioners from the National Planning Commission about the long-term vision, and of course, even the chairperson of the Financial and Fiscal Commission about intergovernmental funding, and hopefully the chairpersons of finance cluster committees of Parliament about the legislative road ahead.
And of course, as we have mentioned, we'll be bringing you the voice of the people. Our teams have been out on the streets of Cape Town to hear what ordinary South Africans are hoping to hear from the Minister of Finance this afternoon. Their stories are a vital part of this national conversation.
So whether the minister's message is one of excitement or simply a steady as she goes reassurance of stability, we are here to provide the context, the analysis, and the facts that you need.
Now, the 2026 budget speech build-up continues right here on Parliament TV. But what does the budget process entail? Let's watch this short clip.
Of the budget is one of the most important oversight functions of Parliament. The budget reflects the choices that government has to make, and it is the tool it uses to achieve its economic and development goals. In the budget, government sets out what it's going to spend and the income it collects, which it needs to finance its expenditure. The government has to balance a wide range of legitimate demands with limited resources at its disposal. Budget oversight is intended to help government move forward to realize its goals by increasing government's accountability to its citizens. The budget process occurs over a period of about 18 months. The budget of any financial year undergoes a 4-stage process. The stages are drafting, planning, and formulation, the legislative process, implementation, as well as auditing and assessment. Parliament and government departments plan the budget for months in advance for the following year, implementing the current budget while continuously monitoring it for delivery and compliance with policy, and evaluating and auditing the previous year's budget. During the legislative phase of the budget, the National Assembly, the National Council of Provinces, and the provincial legislatures debate budget votes with the involvement of interest groups and civil society, the media, and the general public. This is to ensure that they reflect national priorities and accommodate outcomes and actions required by the midterm strategic framework. It is important to measure the effectiveness of public spending and the manner in which public resources are spent. The more immediate goals are to ensure that government budget priorities are consistent with the declared policy objectives and that the financial resources allocated to priority areas are spent fully and properly. However, a larger purpose of the budget process is to contribute to democracy through ensuring openness, transparency, and accountability for public resources.
Hume, it is the financial translation of a political vision, and that vision was laid out just under 2 weeks ago by President Cyril Ramaphosa during the State of the Nation address that was held on the 12th of February. Now, the president stood before the nation and made a series of commitments, promises, aimed directly at easing the burden on South African consumers who are feeling the squeeze from all sides. Now, he spoke of a new chapter of turning our economy towards inclusive growth. But of course, we still need to look at that because the minister is now has that responsibility to fund the visions and the commitments that the president made just last week. And this means that the minister is tasked with making a reality of those words that the president made, translate them into tangible relief and opportunity, and they must find an expression in hard numbers, of which we will hear Minister Godongwana present today in the Dome at 2 p.m. And of course, I am joined by Mr. Alex Mabunda, who is an economist and CEO of Dingiso Consulting Group. Mr. Mabunda, thank you so much for making the time.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Mr. Mabunda, of course, you've been analyzing these cross currents very closely, right? In your view, what is the single most important message the minister needs to convey today to not only just reassure markets, but also to reassure the millions of South Africans who are hoping that something better will come from this budget?
Yeah, of course, indeed, as you said, the president came in last week and made some commitments. And we know some of the existential issues that are facing the country, whether it's unemployment, the high cost of living, deteriorating infrastructure, issues around municipalities, not functioning and not delivering the services. We've seen, for example, the water crisis lately.
Yeah.
That's emerging. We've just come off a very terrible situation of load shedding.
Oh, yes.
So indeed, the country is looking forward to those promises now being turned into action.
Yeah.
We always say in the business sector that show me your budget and I know your intentions. So indeed, the intentions have been made, and let's see whether whether those intentions do translate, into the policy statement or the budget policy statement, as it were. And of course, I think people will be looking at issues around, first and foremost, the big issue of VAT, whether we going back to that debate. The sentiment is that we're not going back there because of some of the improvements that we have seen as well, with more than expected collections from SARS, and some of the indicators showing that the initiatives to reduce spending have made or at least have resulted into some form of dividend. People will be looking at what the budget is going to say about initiatives to deal with the water issues, which has now become the new version of load shedding. There's also a sticking issue of tax brackets having not been adjusted for the past 2 years. So whatever increase that you will have gotten from your salary, it still gets eaten up, by the unadjusted tax budgets for inflation.
Yeah.
So these are some of the issues that obviously, people will be looking to see whether there is some form of reliefs to consumers. Yeah.
Mr. Mabunda, let's look at the macroeconomic picture and investor confidence, right? Now, as the minister takes the podium today, where does South Africa actually stand? Just give us your assessment of the triad of concerns. We have economic growth, we have investor confidence and affordability for the consumer. Are we genuinely at a turning point, or is this a fragile recovery moment that can easily be reversed?
Look, I think the tail end of your takes up the sentiment from our point of view. I mean, we've had a long period of a sub 1% economic growth.
Yeah.
And I think for the first time we went just above 1%. The projection now is that we're going to go to about 1.5% of growth. We've had the removal from grey listing, which also now is boosting confidence.
Yes.
And also, we are now seeing the currency starting to improve against the dollar. And some of the big threats around tariffs, have now been alleviated with numbers not responding to some of the initiatives that the US
Yes.
has been throwing threats into our economy with a 30% tariff. And we've seen also the courts in the US,
Yeah.
challenging that position. So in balance, we're beginning to see some sort of improvements, but those improvements are certainly not sufficient. We know that the 1.5% economic growth projection, or 1.4, if you like, depending on which projector you're looking at, it's not sufficient. We're still looking at that 4 to 6% real growth to support employment and the sort of fiscal consolidation that we're looking at. We're still paying over 20% of our income into debt servicing. Of course, there's a small improvement in terms of the fact that for the first time, our debt to GDP ratio is not going up, it's stabilizing at just under 78%, if you like. So if it was a graph, it would just be stabilizing. And now we want to see, whether you look at up or down.
Yes.
But it has to go positive. But at the moment, we're at a plateau, which is a great improvement. I mean, it's like moving from a loss to, break even.
To break even, yeah.
But now I want to see a profit position. I think there's a lot of areas that we still need to improve on. And I don't know if you want me to elaborate on those or maybe.
Please, go for it, please.
No, look, I mean, to get to the 4-6% growth, we need to accelerate the structural reforms in the various industries, whether it's the logistics industries. We need to make sure that the threat of water shedding does not materialize in a way that the load shedding for energy has. But most importantly for this country, I think we have to appreciate that in an economy of 60 million people, where easily 40 to 50% of those people are outside the active economic net, it's not sustainable. So we need to certainly make sure that reforms to redistribute, the economic participation are put in place. I saw that the president came in and SONA and spoke about the public procurement bill regulations, which they have been stalling. And we understand that those regulations are also meant to make sure that the whole transformation agenda is effected in a way that makes sure that women, people with disabilities, and Black people in general begin to realize a much greater slice of the economy. And I think with those type of reforms is where you will start to see real growth. But if we just focus on the huge, industrial undertakings, whether it's to ship more minerals to the ports, but with little economic activity internally, and with little consumer activity, we'll struggle to get to those type of numbers. So great, signs of recovery, but a lot still needs to happen to get us to the sweet spot.
All right. Now, Mr. Mabunda, thank you so much. Obviously, our conversation will continue. To our viewers, please stay with us. We're having some technical problems here on Parliament TV. However, we are going to get that sorted as we await the budget speech that is set to go on in about 40 minutes, where Minister Godongwana will take to the podium in the Dome. Thank you so much.
Andilindele ubana avule i-opportunity abantwana abangaphangeliyo, i-youth. Sibaninzi, I think 90% wethu akaphangeli, uhleli phansi. Ingahle avule imisebenzi, at least abantwana bakwazi ukuziphangelelela. Enye ingase anyuse negranti yabantwana, because kunabantu abangathathi ntweni abaxhomekeke kwigranti. Ingase anyuse nakuyo, nakubantu abangakwazi ukuzenzela nto, i-disability. Ingahle anyuse nakuyo abantu abangakwazi ukuzenzela nto, abangakwazi uphangela. Ingase anyuse naphaya. Nazi into endiyilindeleyo kumphathisi.
Into endibayelayo mna inye, ndibayela uba sinyusele igrant yobudala yethu. Eyam igrant inyuka isihla iphathwa by 2.3, 2.2, apho iqiniseko khona 2.2, enye 100 angabi yaphi na. Ndibawela loo nto. Kuvule namathuba emisebenzi, abantwana bethu basebenzi. That's why bekhangela. Ungathi ngakuvulwa imisebenzi neefeme zavalwa. Noko sivulwe, noko ngabhetele. Ngabhetele kakhulu. Nale into ibonakalayo uba icrime iyenyuka. Iyenyuka nyhani. Ngabawela loo nto.
No, ngolesithathu xa kusohlula imali umphathiswa bendibawela mna ukuthi ngokunokwam imbono akwazi into yoba ngabana atshintshe mhlawumbi athobe imali kwicala lepetrol, diesel, akwazi uba mhlawumbi anganyusa kwicala lotywala, kwicala legrosari. Noko siyabetheka igrosari inyuka oko, so ingase kpisa zam uthoba kwicala legrosari. Nalapha erenkini apho sisebenza khona sinamatikiti siqhuba ko-yellow lane, ingase at least akwazi usithobela at least amatikiti singabhalwa kakhulu, because ka ungaqhubanga ku-yellow lane awuzufumana mali. So uzawuhamba ungaqhubi ku-yellow lane, then ke ngoku awuzufumana pay emlungwini. So ndicinga uba mna bangazama uthoba kwiinto ezinjalo, ungazama uba bhetele enze amathuba omsebenzi ebantwini abangasebenziyo. Noba i-350 angaziyeka because akho mntu uyenzani i-350. So incinci i-350, at least uba ngabana angazama amathuba omsebenzi, abantu bakwazi usebenza, bafumane imali bangahlali elokishini. Enkosi ke ngoku.
Ngilapha eCape Town ngizosebenza ngifuna umsebenzi but ngokwe-age angikuthola umsebenzi si-unemployed siqhuba amatekisi but ngifuna ukwazi ukuthi umphathiswa uMinister of Finance kungani eyikhathile imali yegranti singayifumani i-SRD grant. Yiloko engifuna ukwazi menze i-budget speech. Enkosi ngiyabonga.
20 seconds, 20 seconds.
Ingasambuselo, bravo. Into engathanda uba okay zingenziwa kufakwe like i-business zabantu abatsha, bave like i-ideas zabo, yeah, okanye babanike imisebenzi kwezi-learnership.
And welcome back to Parliament TV. Of course, this is the live coverage, build up to Mr. Enoch Godongwana before he takes the podium to deliver the budget speech for 2026. I'm still in conversation with Mr. Mabunda, and he's giving us an analysis and his perspective on some of the issues that the minister ought to address when he delivers that State of the Nation address just at 2 p.m. Mr. Mabunda, of course, we spoke about economic growth, right? And you spoke about how seemingly we've just plateaued, basically. We're on a break-even point. And probably that is why we're not even seeing that economic growth translating into employment. It's translating into businesses making more money and being able to employ more people, right? Beyond that, let's talk about the reforms that you were talking about and how you think that government should adopt those reforms so that we get better economic growth. Beyond that, do you think the likes of, for example, the SRD grant, just like one of our the people on the clips had said, do you think the SRD grants and other grants are sustainable in ensuring economic growth going forward?
Look, of course, we can admit that the grants do certainly support spending. But, you know, in any business, if you spend without generating the income, then you are pushing yourself into the negative of an income statement. But having said that, we also appreciate, you know, the role that that grant plays. I mean, there are people who are in destitute situations that, in as much as to me and you know, at 350 rands or 400 rands, depending on where it goes, it might not mean much, but to someone who has no other form of income, that can be meaningful. And I think, you know, the South African state is indeed perhaps the only state in the world, you know, that has that form of, you know, social net expansion. But having said that, we do need to concentrate and focus more on increasing our revenue generation.
Yes, yes.
And it's just unfortunate that there's a relationship between, the activities of your populace and the growth of the economy. So there is a sense by which we need to innovate even around those grants
Yeah.
to make sure that in some way or the other, those grant recipients do, even in the most indirect way, contribute
Yes.
to economic growth. Are they sustainable? Look, I think we can say they're not, in
Yeah.
a sense that currently, in order to accommodate those grants, we have to sacrifice quite a lot, of other economic, investments of economic value.
Yes.
Our infrastructure has deteriorated to levels that are becoming so critical that beyond those, then there's a tipping point.
Yeah.
And if you look at the amount of money that we're spending on those grants, and with my memory not serving me very well, I think it's in excess of 30 or so billion. And you look at the gap that we have in terms of our repairing our infrastructure
Yeah.
and other areas that would have a much greater economic impact. You can then see that we, trading in a path that is not sustainable, but perhaps it's necessary
Yeah.
under the circumstances.
Now, of course, there's data suggesting that we are entering 2026 with a 30-year high in investment confidence rating, right? Now, this is supported by commodities and, of course, the GNU stability. Now, yet when it comes to fixed investment as a percentage of GDP, it still remains stuck, right, around 14%, far below the between 20 and 26%, which was envisioned. Now, what is causing this gap, Mr. Babunda, and between the sentiment and actual capital deployment? And what should we hear from the budget speech today that can bridge that?
Yeah, well, of course, sentiments are exactly that, right? They are sentiments.
Yes, of
But
course.
it's also reality. And at some point, you hope that the sentiment will, or at least the reality,
Yeah.
will eventually meet the sentiment. And of course, there's also this lag, where when sentiment is positive, the actual dividend of that sentiment, is seen maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line. Because when the sentiment is positive, that's where, investors start to open up their pockets, and start to make those investments. But you don't see them on the day of the sentiment. So it's really a great position that we're in now, a 20-year high on sentiment. But at least we should be realistic that the other indicators on the real side will have a lag effect and will only sort of catch up, 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line. I think what's critical is that we should be cognizant of that which, makes up the sentiment and make sure that we don't slip backwards. And of course, the whole initiatives around fiscal consolidation that we've had in the last at least 3 years, which has been very difficult because, government spending had to be reduced in order to start balancing up the books. Investors rather want to be sure that you are not going on a fiscal cliff where, for example, you can't afford, your debt. And so all of those things that we have had to go through a lot of pain to come to a point where, for example, if, as I said earlier, that for the first time, our debt to GDP ratio is going to stay, at the same level. And of course, the projection is that in the next 5 or so years, it's going to go down to about 60%. So if we don't slip back, the grey listing, those initiatives that SARB and the National Treasury and the banks have been undertaking to make sure that we satisfy the removal from that grey listing. We can't slip back on those matters. The reforms that we are undertaking in terms of the ports and the logistics, we can't slip back. We can't have this watershedding coming in. The initiatives to reform municipalities must come in and show some dividends. So at least we know what is it that we need to do, right? And we should just stick with that and do more. And that will not only maintain the sentiment, but it will hopefully increase it. its positivity and maybe accelerate, the rate at which then that sentiment translates into material dividends.
Now, earlier you spoke about the elephant in the room, VAT, right? And I think a lot of people are concentrating or putting more focus on that because of the events of what happened last year, right? Now, with that, we've seen tensions between parties within the Government of National Unity just last year over the tax policy. Now, given the opposition from both within and outside the GNU, how would you describe the socioeconomic and political context within which the minister stands to deliver the State of the Nation address now in 2026? And is this budget of unity or is it a budget of compromise in your perspective?
I think at least we can appreciate that, since that standoff, certainly between the two major parties in Parliament over the VAT issue, there has been some much greater, synergy in the GNU and much more stability and maybe less squabbles and fights, certainly in the public domain, than we would have had, in the nascent month of this government.
Yeah.
And I think the ruling party has also appreciated, that in as much as it remains the majority party in Parliament and in cabinet, they have to take care of the sentiment, of the other parties. And I think it was a hard lesson because, the effect of the delay in the passing of budget has had a very big ripple effect, which, if you ask me, I will even argue that in terms of the economic growth, it would have had some sort of a half percentage point effect. So I think now heads have cooled down. Both sides appreciate that, certain squabbles don't benefit this economy. And I think we come here in a much more calmer political environment as far as the GNU is concerned. And so is it a compromise? I think, yes, there's certainly some bit of compromise, but I think you can also appreciate that there are some also positive dividends coming from the revenue collections that shows some bit of surplus, which I think it's going to make the Minister of Finance relax a little bit. I think it would be agitating if he came here with a huge deficit and still knowing that he can't touch the sensitive topic of VAT. So I think in as much as political stability is concerned, and I think this is building into that sentiment that you spoke of, we are certainly on a positive, but we need to be vigilant still.
Now, talking about that surplus, do you then still expect the minister to look for money elsewhere as well, perhaps through improved SARS enforcement and compliance rather than touching personal income tax or even VAT rates? Can we expect a no surprises type of approach when it comes to the tax front?
Yeah, look, of course, the expectation is that the minister is not going to surprise us in any big way. We know that the sin taxes, because no one argue against those, the sugar tax will probably go high.
Yes.
The reduced petrol price regime will open up a gap for, bigger taxes on the fuel levy. And I think those are the areas that the minister will more likely be looking into to then, continue to consolidate the fiscal position in terms of collections.
Now, of course, you spoke now about the full fuel prices and how that might even lead into fuel levies being increased, right? Now, let's turn to the South African household. We've seen data showing that the food basket prices has eased slightly, just slightly, right? And fuel prices have dropped. However, we also see price fatigue. Consumers are pushing back, switching brands and prioritizing affordability above all else. How much more wiggle room does a consumer have in South Africa? And does the budget need to either protect them or stimulate the demand that businesses so desperately need?
Yeah, I think the whole issue of tax brackets, comes to play. For 2 years, we have not had any meaningful adjustments, if any. And this is the opportunity now to adjust those brackets, to then make sure, or at least ensure that the consumers start to, realize the benefit of any inflationary increases that they would have had in their income.
Mm.
Unfortunately, any increase in the fuel levy would work against that position.
Yeah.
But in the overall, we also hope that that price stability that we are seeing, and then with the inflation now being pegged around 3%, in the medium term, that should start to improve the value of a household income, and also eventually start to see that consumer spending
Yes.
show some positivity.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mabunda.
It's my greatest pleasure.
And that was Mr. Mabunda sharing some of his insights with regards to the budget and some of what we can expect from Minister Godongwana as he takes the podium at around 2 o'clock today and delivers the budget speech for 2026. Stay tuned to Parliament TV.
My name is Thabo. My name is Mambane. My traditional name is Makiti. My name is Mambane. Ndakhulela endaweni yaseMpumalanga. Ngathwasa ndimncane around 11 years. So la kule industry now I'm turning 36 years. Now it's 2026. I'm turning 36 years. Since ngathwasa ndimncane 10 years. Uhulumende wethu esimthandayo singajabula ukuthi nathi abe khona isibonelelo asibonelela ngazo singebelaphi bendabuko, ikakhulukazi apha kunogogo abanye abadala abangasakwazi ukusebenza ey'ndumbeni, abangasakwazi ukwenzani, kodwa-ke ufinyelele ukuthi abakafiki esigabeni sokuthi bangahola ipension. Kodwa-ke labo gogo babe sebalimele because umsebenzi wethu sisebenza kakhulukazi siyaguqa senzane amadolo abese ayalimala. So kube khona lokuncane lokubonelelwako labantu abadzala noma in-government wethu uhulumende uma angazama ukusakhela noma ngabe indzawo leyifaka kungathiwa ngumtholampilo, which means a hospital or a clinic, lapho-ke sizokwazi ukuthi sivukele nathi sazi ukuthi kunobantu abavukela kabasi. Ngamanye amathuba omsebenzi lawo ngabangela ukuthi thina singebelaphi bendabuko singahlali noma ngabe akungeni bantu ey'ndumbeni, because asisebenzi sihlalele ukubuka lokhu ukufikayo okuncane, and it's not that funa aba bantu sibakhoste imali eninzi. Asithole imali because nabo abaphangeli abanye babo.
My name is Sweam Williams. I'm a film director and writer, and sometimes I perform as well. I'm the founder of a collective called the African Film DAO. The African Film DAO represents more than 200 filmmakers from across the continent. What we do is we empower filmmakers to utilize blockchain technology and new technologies such as AI to enhance the filmmaking process. I'm also the founder of the Hollywood African Cinema Connection, which is a film festival in Cape Town showcasing exclusively African films. We are connected to the Hollywoodland DAO, which was founded by Terence Winter. Terence Winter is the writer of The Wolf of Wall Street and The Sopranos, writer and producer. So our festival connects African filmmakers to Hollywood mentorship. My company is called Holocene Films. We are a film production company. However, we also have a tech wing, Holocene Labs, which works with emerging technologies such as blockchain and AI. My expectations are that I would like to see the DTIC rebate reinstituted, although I'd like to see 50% of that money allocated to creating local IP. And like I said, that it doesn't need to take a rebate format. It could also be in the form of seed funding or equity investment into Indigenous IP. With regards to the National Film and Video Foundation, I don't believe they need any more money than what they already have, to be honest. What I would like to see is stricter implementation of that funding process, better evaluation panels, and for them to actually be held to task in terms of their internal management structure.
Welcome back. You are still watching Parliament TV, but we are on the hour and we're expecting the Minister of Finance to deliver the budget speech, and the House is already in preparation of that. Let's cross over to the House.
Please settle down. Order. We'd like to welcome in the House the President, Deputy President, the Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces and members of the NCOP, whom we have invited as guests. We also want to recognize our leaders of political parties, leaders of business, leaders of civil society, who are all with us here in the House. But most importantly, we also want to acknowledge members of civil society and their organization and communities who had various matches, but also reflections on their expectation on the budget. We do recognize them, even though they may not be in the House, and also our people at home. I see some members are looking at me with a smile, wanting me to recognize them individually. So all of you who have been smiling at me, I do see you and I recognize you. And I know here we've got students who are here representing their organizations and having expressed also their views that they think both in terms of education and the issues of young people, those will be catered for in the budget. So I want to recognize all of you and be happy this time that Minister of Finance and the Executive, Mr. President, were here for Budget 101. I don't think there will be Budget 2.0 like we had last time. But we had agreed, Mr. President and Minister of Finance, that if today you are not ready, we were going to have a budget tabled with or without your agreement, because at the end of the day, Parliament passes the budget. So I will now ask to announce that the vacancy which occurred in the National Assembly owing to the resignation of Ms. T.G. Shiviti has been filled by the nomination of Ms. Zamakanyase Kanyase with effect from 24. Order, honorable members. This vacancy has been filled with effect from 24 February 2026. The member has made and subscribed the oath in the Speaker's office. I want to welcome Honorable Zamakanyase, and if you can stand so that members can see you. Thank you very much, Honorable Member. I will ask the Secretary to read the first and second orders.
Introduction, Appropriation Bill, and tabling of the Division of Revenue Bill. And Introduction, Special Appropriation 2025-26 Bill.
Thank you, the Honorable Minister of Finance.
Honorable Speaker, Togo Didiza, Deputy Speaker Anneli Lotriat, His Excellency, the President of the Republic of South Africa, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, Honorable Deputy President Paul Mashatile, Cabinet colleagues, the members of the Budget Council and the Budget Forum, Governor of the South African Reserve Bank, Lesesha Kganyago, Commissioner of the South African Revenue Service, Edward Kisbertan, Chairperson of the Financial and Fiscal Commission, Patience Mbava, honorable members and fellow South Africans, I have the honor to table the following documents before this House. The 2026 Division of Revenue Bill, the 2026 Appropriation Bill, the 2025-26 Special Appropriation Bill, the 2026 Estimate of National Expenditure, the 2026 Budget Review, and this 2026 Budget Speech. Honorable members, we've reached the important turning point in the management of our public finances. 5 years ago, the outlook was stark. State capture had hollowed out critical institutions and weakened state-owned institutions. South Africa had been downgraded to junk status by the last of the three major credit ratings agencies in 2020. The devastation of the coronavirus pandemic, coupled with the Russia-Ukraine conflict, had dealt a blow to the global growth. And in 2023, the Financial Action Task Force had placed South Africa on its grey list. The warning lights were flashing. Public finances were under severe strain and growth had stalled. Faced with this crisis, we chose not to be defined by it. Instead, we turned it into a catalyst for change. We commit to a clear reform agenda and we committed to a clear reform agenda and a disciplined fiscal strategy built on three principles: stabilize debt, invest in infrastructure, and spend better. Today, that commitment has delivered tangible results. For the first time in 17 years, debt will stabilize and it will continue to fall in the coming years. The budget deficit has narrowed significantly, and the debt service costs are also falling. The world has taken notice. South Africa has been removed from the FATF grey list. We secured our first credit rating upgrade in 16 years, and borrowing costs have eased, creating space for growth and development. These are signals of restored credibility, of renewed resilience, and of a nation regaining its foot. The lesson is a simple but powerful one. Steady structural reform and responsible public finances are the bedrock of a prosperous and more inclusive South Africa. Honourable members, allow me to turn to the global and domestic economic outlook. The global economy is projected to grow by 3.3% in 2026, broadly in line with last year's outcome. Advanced economies are expected to grow moderately, while emerging markets will continue to anchor global momentum. India and sub-Saharan Africa in particular are forecast to grow more strongly, supported by resilient domestic demand. These developments are unfolding within an unprecedented global trade environment, characterized by persistent geopolitical tensions and shifting trade policies which are reshaping supply chains. In response, we need to diversify our trade portfolios and secure our markets, reduce vulnerabilities to external shocks, and position ourselves to benefit from the emerging global growth centers. On the domestic front, our growth outlook is steadily improving. We project real economic growth of 1.6% in 2026, an improvement from the 1.4% estimated in 2025. This improvement reflects the continued strengthening of economic performance from the second half of 2025. Over the medium term, growth is expected to average 1.8%, reaching 2% by 2028. Persistent logistics, bottlenecks, weak public infrastructure, and the recent outbreak of the foot and mouth disease continue to weigh on economic activity and pose risks to the outlook. In the light of this, rapid inclusive growth remains our only durable path forward. Our efforts to promote faster economic growth continue to revolve around 4 pillars. First, maintaining macroeconomic stability, implementing structural reforms, investing in growth-enhancing infrastructure, and build state capacity. These pillars are the foundation upon which inclusivity is built and how we ensure that growth is faster. Madam Speaker, a key facet of macroeconomic stability is prudent fiscal management that advances socio-economic obligations. Our fiscal strategy involves 4 features. A, support economic growth by accelerating public investment, improve the efficiency of public spending, improve the composition of spending by containing the public service wage bill while increasing capital investment, entrenching sustainable public finances with a principles-led fiscal anchor. We are already reaping the fruits of this strategy. The consolidated budget deficit has narrowed to 4.5% of GDP for 25-26, an improvement from 4.8% that we estimated in the 25 budget. The deficit falls to 4% in 26-27 and 3.61% the year after. Gross debt stabilizes as share of GDP in 25-26 at 78.9%. In 2026, it falls further to 77.3% of GDP and declines to 76% by 28-29. This slightly higher debt peak this year reflects weaker nominal GDP growth and our decision to take advantage of strong investor demand in domestic and global markets by increasing our issuance in 25-26. The main budget primary surplus for 25-26 reaches 0.9% of GDP. In the next financial year, it expands to 1.6% and then to 1.9% in 27-28. By 28-29, we see it reaching a 2.3%. Honorable Speaker, to sustain fiscal discipline, we intend to continue the engagement on fiscal anchors. We aim to introduce a proposal of a principle-based fiscal anchor in the medium-term budget policy statement after thorough consultation in Cabinet, Parliament, and with the public. Just as inflation targeting provided clarity and credibility to monetary policy, the fiscal anchor aims to entrench fiscal credibility. Madam Speaker, the structural reforms to lift growth we are implementing alongside the fiscal structure to reflect an understanding that the state should adjust to the needs of the national economy in a flexible way. Operation Vulindlela must be understood in this context. In terms of energy reforms, we are stabilizing electricity supply and building a competitive, reliable energy market. Regulatory reforms in this sector have unlocked significant private investment, accelerating generation capacity and driving the transition towards cleaner, reliable power. In logistics, we are dismantling bottlenecks in rail, and ports that have throttled exports and raised the cost of doing business. Our intention is to bolster public-private investment in rail operations while retaining state ownership of the rail infrastructure. The objective is to move goods faster, cheaper, and more reliable. Reforms in local government include shifting to a performance-linked utility model for water and electricity services. This is aimed at strengthening financial sustainability, accountability, and transparency. Spatial and housing reforms focus on restructuring our cities to ensure that people have access to affordable housing located closer to centers of economic activity. This is a systematic effort to remove the structural blockages that have held back growth for many years. Madam Speaker, over the past 3 years, our tax system has demonstrated resilience despite slow economic growth. For 25-26, the gross tax revenue is revised upwards by 21.3 billion compared to the estimate in the 25 budget. Higher than expected net VAT, corporate income tax, and dividends tax collections improved the year-in-year outlook. As a result, government has decided to withdraw the 20 billion in tax increases provisionally included in the May 25 budget. The improved fiscal position allows us enough room to withdraw the proposed tax increases without putting fiscal sustainability or economic activity at risk. We are also proposing additional tax measures to ease financial burden on households and businesses by adjusting personal income tax brackets and rebates fully in line with inflation. Ndibuyisela imali back ezipokothweni zenu. Honest and in tax ngoku ndinika nje imali back. Madam Speaker, our national savings and investment rate is far below the levels needed to truly create generational wealth and support local investment in the economy. To encourage South Africans to save more, we propose that the tax-free annual investment limit be increased from 36 to 46,000 per year. The limit to retirement fund deductions be raised from 350,000 to 430,000, allowing individuals to invest more each year on a tax-free basis. Madam Speaker, each year we ask South Africans to send in their tips for the budget. This year we got more than 1,200 citizens sent us their opinions and suggestions. Renette Oosthuizen, a small business owner from Gauteng, had this tip. Minister Godongwana, please increase the VAT registration threshold for small business to 2 million. The 1 million threshold has not kept pace with the cost of doing business, close quote. Renette, you'll be happy to know that in this budget, the compulsory VAT registration threshold increases from 1 million to 2.3 million. We are taking other measures to support small business. We are raising the capital gains tax exemption for the sale of small business for older persons from 1.8 to 2.7 million. This applies to small business worth 15 million instead of 10 million previously. It will enable small business owners to receive more tax relief when they sell their business. Madam Speaker, increases to certain taxes are unavoidable. That's the bad part of me. For 2026, excise duties on tobacco will unfortunately be increased in line with inflation. This includes excise duties on electronic nicotine and non-nicotine delivery system. As a result, a tax of 20 pack of cigarettes rises from 22.81 to 23.58. Pipe tobacco rises by 28 cents per 25 grams, and cigarettes tobacco by 87 cents per 50 grams. Cigars rise by 4.56 per 23 grams. The excise on alcohol beverage also rises by inflation. As such, a 340 milliliter can of beer or cider increases by 8 cents. A 750 milliliter bottle of wine goes by 15 cents. A 750 million bottle of spirits will increase by 320. In terms of the fuel levy, the total increase will also be in line with inflation. The general fuel levy will go up by 9 cents per liter for petrol and 8 cents per liter for diesel. The carbon fuel levy will go up by 5 cents per liter for petrol and 6 cents for diesel. The road accident fund fuel levy will increase by 7 cents per liter. Honourable members, the strong revenue collection this year and the overall resilience of the tax administration reflects an efficient and agile tax administration, continually improving through targeted compliance initiative. However, the scourge of illicit trade represents a major threat to these hard-won gains. It threatens our economy, endangers consumers, and robs the fiscus of billions in revenue. The recent announcement by a major tobacco producer that will close its local operation is a stark reminder of the impact of illicit trade on the jobs and overall economy. The sophisticated and organized nature of illicit operations demands an intensive effort to curb this trade, secure prostitutions, and dismantle its supply chains. SARS has already intensified its efforts. It will also continue its joint operations with border management, the SAPS, and the Defence Force. System. I always improvise. Wait a little.
Honourable members, can the minister continue with his speech?
Yes, this thing has failed me.
It's page 7, Minister, page 7.
Honourable members, I know you are trying to help, but you should have raised it through the speaker. Thank you very much, Honourable Mawujo. Minister, you can proceed.
SARS has already intensified its efforts. It will also continue its joint operations with the Border Management Agency, the SAPS, and the Defence Force to stop the illicit trade in tobacco. I'm going to come back in later when I talk about the crime and peace and security. On the financial sector, Madam Speaker, National Treasury continues to work on ensuring that financial services customers are treated fairly and the sector operates optimally. One key issue is the more than 88 billion rand of unclaimed financial assets and benefits. Following recommendations from the Financial Sector Conduct Authority, National Treasury will introduce reforms to manage these unclaimed benefits through the creation of a central administrator responsible for record keeping and tracing. We will also shortly publish draft regulations under the Currency and Exchange Act to include crypto assets in our capital inflow management regime. Crypto assets will now be governed in the cross-border movement of capital framework, which will be complementary to regulations already in place to prevent use of crypto assets to launder money and commit fraud. The use of data and artificial intelligence has become a critical for the future development of economies worldwide. As such, data infrastructure should be considered as critical as electricity, ports, and transport networks. This year, we will explore options to help data centers and related infrastructure to expand this investment in South Africa and solidify our role as a regional hub for these technologies. One of the main policy objectives is to ensure that the financial sector supports regional integration and the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. National Treasury is easing restrictions on the cross-border flows of capital by enabling domestic asset managers to manage portfolios of foreign assets. This will improve competitiveness and allow South Africans to co-function as a hub for investment into the continent. National Treasury, working with the South African Reserve Bank, has prioritized modernizing the national payment system and innovation in digital finances. The payment ecosystem management has achieved its first milestone, and with the establishment of the payments utility, which was completed in November last year, with the establishment of Pay-in Corporation. Pay-in will provide open, shared digital payments infrastructure to support operational ability across various payment providers, serving as the main platform for high value and retail transactions. In the budget in May 25, we made the statement that we will do everything possible to use savings arising or expenditure reviews to fund future projects. In other words, tax will be the last resort. Madam Speaker, in this context, in this budget last year, as we have said, we have kept that promise through our commitment to finding savings from unproductive expenditure, closing leakages, and rooting out inefficiencies. I'm happy to announce that 12 billion in savings have been identified over the medium term. Targeted and responsible savings are not a once-off initiative. They will be an ongoing and entrenched part of the budget process going forward to weed out inefficiencies and low performance programs. Every program and every allocation must demonstrate value, efficiency, and accountability. As part of this process, the public transport network grant has been scaled down by about 8.4 billion over the next 3 years. The grant has not improved access to public transport relative to the investment made. The grant will, however, continue to help cover indirect costs in cities that run business bus services. Enhanced targeting of social grants authentication of beneficiaries to reduce fraud in the grant system will yield 3 billion of savings. The South African Social Security Agency has its biometric and income verification process resulted in nearly 35,000 grants being identified as incorrect, fraudulent, and therefore terminated. Honorable members were committed to improving access to many South Africans deserving and eligible for social support. Abuse of the system, however, will not be tolerated. The remaining savings, the government will explore ways to reorganize training by introducing a dual training skills acquisition system. we are looking at how institutions with the capacity to train job seekers and graduates can tool them with artisanal skills. Turning to the spending priorities. The budget we're tabling this in for 26-27 will spend 2.67 trillion rand. This spending includes a proposed 5 billion in the contingency reserves to cater for disasters declared since the medium-term budget policy statement. In other words, the disasters that took place in January this year. Government spending remains highly distributive. The social wage accounts for more than 60% of non-interest spending over the medium term. Basic education, health, and social protection constitute 70.3% of the social wage in 26-27, providing support to 13.6 million school children, healthcare service to 84% of the population, social grants to 26.5 million beneficiaries. Coming to social grants, bendicinga ogogo ndizabanyusela kakhulu kodwa ndibanyuselanga ngolu hlobo bendicinga uba ndizabanyusela ngalo kulo nyaka, kodwa ndiyabanyusela. Kodwa ndiyabahoya. Kodwa ndiyabahoya. Social grants are allocated 292.8 billion rand, enabling the following increases. The old age grant, disability grant, and care dependence grants rise by 80 rand in April 2026 to 2,400. The same applies to the War Veterans Grant, which increases by 80 rand to 2,420. The foster care grant goes up from 1.2 in April, a 40 rand increase, and to 1,300 in October, a 10 rand increase. Child support grant and grant in aid grant increased by 20 rand. The social relief of distress continues in the current form over this year. Let me clarify. The SRD is in the baseline of the budget. That's not in dispute. When we say continue, the president says it should be converted into a liable staff. What we will be then be doing during the course of the year, between now and the next financial year, is to give content to that. Is to give content to that, what is going to look like, what has been eligibility criteria, and so on and so on. So there's no dispute that is not going to be in the system. On peace and security, Madam Speaker, the President in his State of the Nation announced the deployment of the Defense Force alongside police to fight illegal mining and gangsterism. To support this and other efforts to intensify law and order, spending on peace and security increases from 268.2 billion in 25-26 to 291.2 billion in 28-29. Border Management Authority has been allocated an additional 990 million rand over the medium term to build capacity by filling 738 posts. 2.7 billion is added to defense over the medium term to improve operations, including maintaining the South African Air Force fighting capability. A quick question arises, and people was also asked this question in the media, about what about the additional deployment of the Defense Force? I'm saying the law acknowledges that the president may at any point in time deploy the armed forces. It doesn't say the president will first check whether there's a budget or something else. If there's war tomorrow, he can say, hey, just go and sit and have a budget. No, the war is going to send the army to go and fight. That's how these things work. Then it's for us to say, in the light of that, Section 16 of the Act of the PFMA considers that deployment as an emergency. We will be working with the Defence Force in this regard to finalize that. But in addition to this, we have given both the Defence Force and the police through the CARA Fund 1 billion each. 1 billion the police, 1 billion the Defence Force for crime prevention strategy. Over the medium term, 883 million is shifted from the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development to the Office of the Chief Justice. This will enable the Office of the Chief Justice to manage its own budget, enhance its independence from the executive from the 1st of April this year. Similar arrangements for the funding of Parliament are being undertaken in the spirit of separation of powers. In other words, Parliament itself must not rely on this executive for the performance of its functions. An additional 687 million has been allocated to increase capacity in the judiciary over the medium term. The President also announced the establishment of special courts. Once the costing is finalized, allocation for this will be considered later in the year. We have had a discussion with the judiciary insofar as this is concerned, together with the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development, and examining how do we give effect to this injunction by the President. We have agreed on 3 phases. The first one is that there are courts that currently are under pressure, and we need to see how can we deal with that pressure. Secondly, we need to look at what does this mean, this establishment of these additional courts in terms of the number of judges? And how soon can we do that? And we have put up some technical teams with the Office of the Chief Justice to pursue this injunction by the President. There are also a number of commissions of inquiry which are taking place. Some of them have asked for an extension. We'll also be looking at how do we fund that extension over time. The special appropriation we're tabling before you of 8.5 billion today looks at 5.8 billion for PRASA rolling stock fleet renewal program. If I may explain to you, how does this thing work? PRASA has had a contract with Gibela. They've got to order a minimum of 35 locomotives per annum. If failure to order 35 is a breach of contract. So we've got to make sure that PRASA continues with its contractual obligations. We've got to pay for up subscription to the World Bank, which we have not been paying for a while, of about R1 billion. We are providing 700 million rand to the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies. We are making this money to the department without earmarking it, because we want them, for now, while we are looking into the details of how we're going to fund the Centec Diet, the SABC, and the SAPO. They should be able to meet this through this platform. On the division of revenue, which is the division of revenue says how money between the different spheres of government is allocated. 48.9% of national raised revenue is allocated to national government, and 41.7% to the provinces, and 9.4% to local government. I must express this point, Mr. President, that although the quantum that goes to national to municipalities is increasing, but as a percentage of the share, there's a decline from about 9.7 to 9.4. And I think it's something we need to be attending. Translated into rands and cents, national gets 951 billion rand, provinces 810 billion rand, municipalities 182 billion rand. Additional allocation to provinces equitably shall include 348 million rand to progressively equalize grade R teacher pay, 340 million rand for early retirement and voluntary exit programs, 390 million rand for the Presidential Employment Initiative. 1.5 billion is added to provincial roads maintenance grant in the 26-27 to fund the carry-through costs of disaster that occurred between April 2024 and June 2025. Basic education. In terms of the consolidated expenditure, spending on education remains the largest component at 23.7% over the medium term. Basic education receives 22.7 billion for carry-through costs announced in May 2025. Early childhood development receives the majority of these funds. 9.9 billion supports employee compensation and other pressures in education. Early childhood, as I've said, development grant receives an additional 12.8 billion over the next 3 years, expanding services to an additional 300,000 children. This will also maintain the increase per child per day subsidy of 24 rand introduced in 25-26. The increased allocation aligned to the National School Nutrition Program to food inflation to continue to provide meals to over 9.9 million learners in almost 20,000 schools. In health and education, Madam Speaker, 26 billion rand is allocated to provide provinces to bolster our HIV/AIDS program, such as the prevention of mother-to-child transmission and the provision of antiretroviral drugs. That's 26 billion. A part of the targeted responsibility and saving initiative, provinces will repurpose some of their funding. We've agreed on this with provinces. Some of their funding to meet the obligation towards the PEPFAR. This follows the funding withdrawal by the United States of America. 21.3 billion is allocated to health sector over the medium term for the compensation and employment of doctors and to make up for the shortfalls in goods and service expenditure. On local government, 86 billion is to support the provision of free basic services to 11 million households. Assuming, I'm making this assumption, assuming these 11.2 households are in the indigenous register. If they are not, there's a challenge. Local government is the sphere where communities experience the state most directly. Yet, many municipalities are in financial and operational distress and therefore unable to deliver services as they should. Audit outcomes highlight this unacceptable reality. 63% of municipalities are in financial distress, and the proportion of clean audits remains unacceptably low. A central challenge with municipalities is that they not only differ in capacity, but also in their revenue-raising potential. This demands a more targeted approach to respond to the diverse pressures facing municipalities. The National Treasury is vital in support for development of long-term financial plans. These plans will improve project identification, sustainable planning, cash flows, and inform financial decisions. This will negate the challenge of unfunded mandates and limited capacity to maintain infrastructure and sustain services. Further structural reforms are underway, including a comprehensive review of the local government fiscal framework, together with a comprehensive review of the local government work paper. Together, these reforms will modernize the intergovernmental system and build a more capable, resilient, and appropriate differentiated local government sphere. What we have called the metro trading system, which we have been raising in Parliament. Essentially what it means that we are incentivizing municipalities to treat their water services and their electricity utilities as business entities which should be run professionally. As a result, we are providing money for this purpose to incentivize municipalities, and we're providing about 27.7 billion. So, and another one, 64 billion. But let me just tell an important story. If you pay an electricity to a municipality, you're not paying an electricity bill outside the bill of the municipality. And if you are paying water, you're not paying outside the water separately. What are the side effects of this? Some effect of this. Johannesburg. They collect about 9 billion rand on water. But because it goes into the main port, what actually comes back into investment into the water, Johannesburg water, is 1 billion rand out of that 9 billion rand. The implications are services. There's no maintenance of the water system. I'm not saying that's the only problem with the water challenge we face. That's one minor problem. If we solve that problem, we can be able to fix leaks and so on. But it won't deal with the fundamental challenge, which is the infrastructure they are dealing with is old. A challenge we need to be discussing as government is how do we deal with that infrastructure. A second area I want to deal with on municipalities is the reform of the infrastructure grant system, municipal infrastructure grant system. Let me just again capture this thing by using an example. Capture this system by using an example. When in 2024, some municipalities had disaster and we provided them with money. In 2025, the same municipalities, there was disaster in the same municipalities. When we gave them the money in 2025, they had not used the 2024 money. Now, the point is, it's easy to say the money returns back to Treasury, but the effect of it is that the communities that have lost a bridge or something still have that problem. So in this regard, the grant system will be reformed to make sure that we are going to provide the money to those institutions, even the district municipality or other accredited institutions, which will help those municipalities to provide the service. That's how this grant is going to be working. Now, coming to the infrastructure issues. Somebody says to me, what is this? Every day you talk about $1 trillion. Yes, because I'm announcing $1 trillion now. In the next outer year, I'll be adding another amount. It will still remain $1 trillion. So it's a rolling thing. How is this trillion broken down? 507 billion rand will be spent by state-owned companies and other public entities. All right. 217.8 billion rand by provinces and 205.7 billion by municipalities. Lastly, by sector, transport and logistics make up the largest share. SANRAL will focus on strengthening long-term network resilience. This includes annual maintenance of approximately 27,000 kilometers and the resurfacing of 2,000 kilometers of road. PRASA, as I've indicated, continues to implement its corridor recovery program and modernize core infrastructure to rebuild reliable, affordable rail service for commuters. This will enable the increase in annual passenger trips from 77 million trips in 24-25 to between 250 and 450 million trips over the medium term. In energy, investment will focus on improving the security of supply and mobilize private sector investment. In the medium-term budget policy, we announced that National, together with the World Bank, are making significant progress with the credit guarantees vehicle. The credit guarantee vehicle, which will support massive investment in transmission infrastructure, will be incorporated as a company in the coming months. Next, we will expand. We expect development partners to confirm their capital participation. Thereafter, the credit guarantee vehicle will apply for a license from the Prudential Authority. We are targeting the credit guarantee vehicle to be operational later this year. In water, investment are directed towards high-impact bulk water augmentation schemes, refurbishing of aging infrastructure, and the completion of strategic projects that support economic nodes and agriculture and household supply. Honored members, we continue to implement reforms to unlock greater private sector participation, enhance spending efficiency, and shorten delivery timelines. On triple Ps, we have amended the triple regulations as we have indicated. There are about 63 projects now at different stages of development. Key amongst them are the 6 border posts that we have announced in time, which are ready to be announced towards the finalization towards the end of the financial of the year. Similar progress with the Gautrain is being made. The conclusion of this project will close major PP transaction in more than 5 years. On the budget facility for infrastructure, the budget facility for infrastructure has approved 21.9 billion for 5 major projects. These include Transnet's coal and iron ore corridor projects, which will restore rail capacity to 7 million tons for coal line and 60 million tons for the iron ore line, and the Polokwane Regional Water Waste Program. As part of the efforts to position infrastructure as an inevitable asset class, government issued an infrastructure bond in 2025, raising 11.5 billion to support the contribution of the BFI approved projects. The BFI call for proposal for 26-27 cycle opens today, Dr. Mzwalet. What that means, both of those people who want to funding via the budget facility for infrastructure need to submit through the window which has been opened from today. We call on public institutions in key sectors of the economy to submit proposals with funding gaps and strategic value for consideration. This includes critical social infrastructure such as courts, correctional facilities. I know Dr. Groenewald has shown a keen interest in 2 specific prisons to be accommodated in this regard. These include also university infrastructure such as the University of Ekurhuleni. University of Ekurhuleni, I don't think is far from a realization, Mr. President. After your speech, I tried to dig into it and understand where it is. And it turns out the University of Ekurhuleni, there were 3 sites that were identified. There's 1 site which is proposed. All we need is the minister to go and visit the sites and make the approval. Once he has done that, according to the document, I'm learning, according to the document, all he needs to do is appoint a supervising university. Included in this project is going to be student accommodation. Then I was talking to the minister Mr. President, and said it's going to be difficult for me to teach a communist about decommodification of student accommodation, because that's essentially the proposal I was putting across to him. On the health front, Dr. Mtsoreti has been up and fighting with me in every budget about 3 specific hospitals. George Munkari Academic Hospital, Inkosi Albert Lutuli Hospital, and Nelson Mandela Hospital. These are the hospitals which will form part of the BFI in the next round. And they're quite important in 2 respects, because they are linked to academic institutions. And secondly, are a demonstration of our commitment that we want to prepare for the implementation of the National Health Insurance by improving the quality of our institutions. Madam Speaker, progressive realization of the fundamental socio-economic rights enshrined in our Constitution is essential to our mission to deal with inequality, poverty, and unemployment. It is a mission that demands that we make prudent fiscal choices. With the health of our public finances comes a great degree of economic freedom and sovereignty. It is this sovereignty that gradually frees us from over-reliance on external debt. It shields us from inherent uncertainties of global finance and global politics. As we have witnessed over the last few years, the established norms of global order can shift and be undermined. To achieve our ultimate goal of better the lives of our people, we must continue pursuing this sovereignty. A budget and a fiscal strategy that advances inclusive growth and the sustainability of public finances is a crucial part of achieving this greater freedom. It moves us closer to fulfilling our constitutional promise to do all that it takes for our people to live with a dignity and prosperity. Madam Speaker, I'm grateful to the President and the Deputy President for their support and leadership. Thank you to Deputy Ministers of Finance, Mr. Sharupen and Dr. Mason. Mr. Sharupen tells me that he wants also to be doctor. So he wants to do a PhD in fiscal rules. So he's going to compete with Masondo not to be the only doctor in the So I'm thankful to my deputy ministers and my director general and the team. My sincere thanks to the governor of the South African Reserve Bank. Let me thank my colleagues in the Ministers' Committee on the Budget and the Budget Council who have shared the task of difficult trade-offs that have to be made in the budget process. Similarly, to the parliamentary committees of finance and appropriation, I express my sincere appreciation. And of course, to my dear wife who has made me so nice looking today. Even the president, I asked him today when he called me to the cabinet, I said, what is my business here, Mr. President? He said, no, we wanted to see how do you look like today. Madam Speaker, let me also take this opportunity to thank the Commissioner of SARS. The Commissioner of SARS, in order to have a better appreciation where is he?
Order, honorable members. Actually, the minister was asking the commissioner to stand up. But I am grateful that all of you gave the commissioner a standing ovation.
Yeah. The problem is the members didn't even allow to contextualize this thing because it's quite important for when we thank the commissioner for the services done over 7 years, we've got to look at the kind of institution he inherited when he took over 7 years ago. It was an institution which was kind of hollowed out, not almost too close to non-functionality, to what the institution which the president in the State of the Nation address called one of the best institutions we've had. That's what the commissioner has done. And we thank him for that. And on behalf of government, I wish to express that unwavering support and thankful to that. Because by the next budget, there'll probably be a new commissioner. That depends on the president. There'll probably be a new commissioner of that. So I also thank every South African. The budget reflects our shared journey and the belief that together we can build more equally, more prosperous economy. Yakuqala kaChalbongo ikwenkwenku. Ngamashaba namabhongo kaChalbongo ke lawa enkosi.
Enoch, Mamchawe.
Order.
Gibo.
Order. Can we be seated? Thank you very much, Minister of Finance, for the presentation of the budget and the tabling of the budget instruments, which will now be referred to the appropriate committees for their consideration, and they will come back to the House. Minister, I'm sure you forgot one last sentence of thanking people. I want to thank all these members of parliament who last year, despite the challenges of having 2.1, 3 point something, but they managed, worked hard, particularly our committees on finance and appropriation, to make sure that in July, we were able to pass the budget. It wasn't an easy year, but I think these members of parliament lived up to the task at hand. Thank you very much to all the honorable members. I will now ask members to stand and wait for the presiding officer and the maids to leave the House, and that concludes the business for the day.
Welcome back. You're still watching Parliament TV, and we're coming to you live on channel 408. And of course, the Minister of Finance has just delivered the budget speech for the 2026 financial year. Of course, we know that speech is motivated by the President's State of the Nation address, which was delivered on the 12th of February. I think when we explained here on Parliament TV, we said the President will outline the programs of government for the year, and then we'll have today the Minister putting up finances on the programs that had been announced by the President. And just to look at some of what the Minister had to say, he spoke strongly on issues of revenue and tax changes, also announcing some relief measures, where we see that the 20 billion in proposed tax has now, the increases has been withdrawn. He also spoke on personal income brackets, which have been fully adjusted for inflation. But another thing that he spoke to when he talked on the sin tax was the increase Firstly, in cigarettes, which I highly welcome, because the cigarette pack will now move from 22, has been increased from 22 rand 81 cents to 23 rand 58 cents per pack. And also the beer goes up with 8 cents. The wine goes up with 15 cents, and the spirits go up with 3 rand 20. And of course, fuel levies increase will be in line with the inflation.
Now, of course, the minister had to focus on social spending. And what does that mean for you as a South African that is a beneficiary of the social grant system? And that means that for the old age and disability grants, you have plus 80 rands more, which means that you will have 2,400 rand. And for the child support grant, that has increased by 20 rand, bringing it to 580. The SRD grant continues in its current form. Now, of course, when we talk about education, which is very important since we had the Bella Act enacted as well, there is a 23.7% of total expenditure. And when it comes to ECD, the expansion for 300,000 additional children. And of course, the school nutrition program, which is now aligned to food inflation, which a lot of children in impoverished communities depend on.
Tshepo, as you would have seen in our build-up, I had an opportunity to speak to a Mamu Mamgwevu from Lang, and she had called for the minister to put an increase in the pensioners' social grants. So I'm sure she will be happy when I visit her this afternoon to give her a feedback on what the minister had said in relation to the social grants. Now, another issue that the minister spoke to was the issue of peace, security, and governance. And you know, if you remember very well, when the president addressed the nation, he had indicated that there will be deployment of soldiers in crime-ridden areas, provinces such as your Western Cape, Gauteng, to deal with issues of illegal mining, and later announcing that Eastern Cape will also benefit from the deployment of soldiers. So for 2026, 2027, 28, 29, the minister has put aside 291.2 billion just to make sure that those announcements that were made by the president are funding. And this funding boost will assist with policing, it will assist with the deployment of the South African National Defence Force, as I've indicated. It will also assist even with Border Management Authority, as well as the Office of the Chief Justice.
Now, of course, in addition to that, especially in the State of the Nation address, the president did highlight the importance of capacitating municipalities. As we know, we have infrastructure that is dilapidating, and service delivery is quite questionable when we look at our different communities. Of course, the budget had to speak to that in terms of local government reform. And the minister announced that 63% of municipalities are in financial distress. And of course, there will be a new performance-linked funding model when it comes to local municipalities. Furthermore, 27.7 billion rand has been allocated for metro trading services reform. And of course, when it comes to municipal infrastructure grant, there will be a reform there in terms of the direct versus the indirect delivery model. Of course, the term there that the minister used was a strong accountability push, just as we had from the president's commitment when he delivered the State of the Nation address.
There are many more commitments that had been made by the Minister of Finance, but if you want to access the full speech, you can go to www.parliament.gov.za. It is also available on www.treasury.gov.za. You should be able to get a full speech there to read for yourself.
And of course, for Parliament, it means that the work starts now within the committees that will hold the various departments accountable in terms of the money that has been allocated, ensuring that every cent goes to its deserved course.
Sure.
And of course, you can watch all those engagements right here on Parliament TV and on our YouTube channel, and also engage with us at Parliament of RSA. It is, of course, your Parliament, your voice, your future.
Kamalam, Dinguthembi Nkosi Ngoma, and from me, it's a goodbye.
Like Alivitse Tshepo Mori, and from ourselves and the team behind the scenes, bye-bye.